Welcome back. An acrimonious by-election campaign in Rochdale will reach its denouement on Thursday, with the suggestion that George Galloway could be returned to the House of Commons for the first time in almost a decade. Galloway is appealing directly to the constituency's large number of Muslim voters on the issue of Gaza. His main opponent, Azhar Ali, was disowned by the Labour Party over comments that he made about the Middle East. Here to give us a sense of what to expect is the pollster and political commentator Matt Goodwin. Matt, welcome back to GB News.
Thanks, Michael.
Well, what should we expect in Rochdale?
Well, ordinarily, we would be expecting another big Labour victory, of course. This should have been fairly textbook for Keir Starmer after the recent by-elections, go into what was a Labour seat and win it comfortably. Instead, we're now looking at potentially the maverick insurgent George Galloway. And by instinct, I suspect he will end up winning this seat. He's got a very big Muslim vote, 30% of the seat is Muslim. He's campaigning specifically on the Gaza issue, and he's been very clear. He's saying to local voters, send me into the House of Commons and I will shake the walls over the issue of Gaza in Israel. So what this will probably end up doing, Michael, instead of helping the Labour Party, is turn up the volume on this issue of the Middle East politics and importing these grievances into the UK.
You talk about your instinct, but you are partly a pollster. Is there any polling?
There is very little polling, and constituency polling in by-elections is notoriously difficult. It's very hard to get an accurate measure. But if you assume that Labour vote is likely going to collapse, you assume that the Conservative vote is as weak as we've seen in recent by-elections, and I think on balance, Galloway's got a very good chance, particularly if he cements that Muslim vote, which he's clearly trying to do. And to be honest, Michael, look, I mean, I don't agree with George Galloway's politics, but he is a very good campaigner. I mean, if you look at his speeches, if you look at what he's been doing on the ground, he's been, I think, outperforming everybody else.
I mean, just to challenge that for a bit, I've heard it alleged that in the constituency, because not everybody follows these matters as closely as we do, that many voters don't know that Azhar Ali has been disowned by the Labour Party.
Yeah.
And even if he has been disowned by the Labour Party, many people would say, so what? I mean, this is a local figure. They know him quite well.
Yeah.
He's going to appear on the ballot, by the way, as the Labour Party candidate. You can't stop that happening.
Yeah.
The second point of challenge is you talk about the Muslim vote.
Yeah.
But many people have been on this programme telling us that we could not regard that as a solid thing.
Yeah.
It's made up of thousands of individuals, some of whom care a lot about Gaza, some who care less about Gaza. But also, some of them, their reaction may be to vote for who they think is the Labour candidate, and others to vote for Galloway. I mean, so without polling, it's quite hard to make these assumptions.
It is, but you can guarantee that over the last few days, Galloway is going to be telling anybody and everybody what has happened with regards to Labour, and I think the people who don't know that Labour have backed off from their candidate will probably not end up voting in this by-election anyway. It will be the more engaged, aware voters who are participating. The other thing to say about the consolidation of the Muslim vote, well, if you look at where Galloway has campaigned previously, notably in areas like Bradford, that is exactly what he has tried to do, quite successfully actually, is drive a wedge really between British Muslims and other parts of the constituency and say, actually, as he said this week, the people of Gaza don't have a vote in this by-election, but you do. That's what he's saying to people locally, right? So he's trying specifically to capitalise on that.
Why are you so pessimistic about what follows if he is elected? Why do you think that signals an intensification of the divisions in our politics and society?
Well, I think what we're seeing generally now in the country is an increase in the temperature, and it's very clear to everybody, I think since October the 7th, that what Britain has essentially done is, through mass migration over many years, has been importing conflicts from overseas, not just the conflict between Gaza and Israel, but also tribal conflicts from Yemen and Syria and parts of elsewhere in the world. And I think having somebody like George Galloway in the House of Commons is going to again be another symbol of the extent to which our politics has become much more sectarian, has become much more tribal. And like many voters out there, Michael, I've been deeply alarmed by the events in recent weeks where, to be frank, we have seen a growing threat to members of Parliament, both physical and verbal. And I think the election of Galloway would symbolise that our politics is becoming much more influenced by a radical Islamism that is primarily motivated by what's happening elsewhere in the world.
You recently posted the following. Do not let the Lee Anderson comments distract us from what is the key point since October the 7th. We have a major problem, you say, with radical Islamism in Britain. Do not let the political and media class take us back to the ridiculous gaslighting that followed the murder of Sir David Amess. So let's just understand what you mean by the gaslighting that followed the murder of David Amess.
Well, what has tended to happen in the past, after the murder of Sir David Amess, after the Manchester Evening News bombings, after the comments, which I don't agree with, by the way, the comments from Lee Anderson over the last 24 hours, is that our national conversation basically focuses on everything and anything but the real issue. We're told that we should be nice to one another. We're told that it's about social media. We're told that it's about an irresponsible MP who Rishi Sunak needs to suspend. We're told that MPs are facing a growing security threat, but we're not told what that threat is. So let's be clear. What all of these things have in common is that they are all pointing to the growing threat within British society from an extreme radical Islamism. That's not to say we have a problem with British Muslims. It is to say that within the British Muslim community, as we know from the Shawcross Review, from polling of British Muslims, from the terrorist attacks that we've experienced over the last 20 years, that we have a serious problem. And by gaslighting, what I'm saying is after these attacks, after these events, after these interventions, what our media and political class tend to say is that, well, this is not actually to do with that issue. They fall over themselves to find any other potential explanation. It's about student activists on the radical left. It's about social media and the perils of Twitter and X. But actually, no, it's about radical Islamism. Every other European country is waking up to discuss this. Germany's talking about it. France is talking about it. Sweden's talking about it. Our political class seem incapable of saying the reason Sir David Amess was murdered, the reason our MPs feel intimidated, and the reason our democracy is being attacked in this way is because of a virulent radical Islamism.
By pure coincidence, because I didn't know you were going to make this point, I didn't even know we were going to discuss this point, I was reading a moment ago, this morning's press. And it's not just the political class, it is also that the media doesn't want to mention this in many cases. For example, there is a story today that members of Parliament, 3 of them, have been granted protection. They've got, drivers and they've got security teams because they're being intimidated. But no indication of who is intimidating them.
No. We've also had national commentators in prominent newspapers say that actually the source of this intimidation is sort of student activists on the left of politics, a bit like it was in the 1960s. So everybody is doing whatever they can to basically avoid the big fat elephant in the room. And that is radical Islamism, which is being emboldened by the radical left because it is obsessed with identity politics. It gives Islamists a free pass. And it is basically, I think, pointing to our broken model of multiculturalism. So what do you do, Michael? What would a different debate look like? Right, number one, we take the Shawcross Review seriously and we say the dominant security threat to our society is from radical Islamism. We need to deal with that. Number two, we have to dramatically lower migration because you cannot have successful integration while running mass migration. It's never worked before. Number three, we then, under controlled migration, need a serious policy that is going to encourage people to integrate into our ways of life and to share our values. The Danes are doing this. They're completely overhauling their education system. The Swedes are doing this. They're completely overhauling their housing and their approach to crime. The French have just decided they're going to deport foreign nationals who glorify Islamist terrorism. Michael, we're behind the curve. We need to draw a line in the sand. We should stop tolerating people who do not tolerate our way of life.
And just to draw this to a conclusion, if we are concerned about divisions in society, as we are, if you and I may feel concerned about the election of George Galloway, if that happens, can we also agree that the comments made by Lee Anderson are profoundly unhelpful if we're trying to bring people together?
Absolutely, and it's very unfortunate because what individuals like Lee Anderson and other people have in common, notably after October the 7th, is they play into the hands of people who don't actually want to talk about these issues. So I don't agree with Lee Anderson's comments, but I do think radical Islamism is the dominant threat to our way of life.
I am obliged to give you the full list of candidates standing in the Rochdale by-election on Thursday, as are Ali, who appears on the ballot as the Labour candidate, Mark Coleman, Independent, Simon Danchuk, Reform UK, Ian Donaldson, Liberal Democrat, Paul Ellison, Conservative, George Galloway, Workers' Party of Britain, Michael Howarth, Independent, William Howarth, Independent, Guy Otten, Green Party, Ravin Rodent Sobotna, Official Monster Raving, Looney Party, and David Tully, Independent. Many thanks indeed
Thank you, Michael.
Matt Goodwin, thank you very much.